things I must say is, I'm full of gratitude, so thank you for getting us back on stage. And I saw Aman just taking a picture because, his wife wants to understand, how does it feel like to be back on stage? I think it's going to be an interesting conversation, and we have two very different individuals, very, very different trajectories, and I think hopefully, I'm looking forward to the questions that not only you ask, but let's tease the entire idea of, if I were to look at, for me, the session's title is really about looking at the possibilities with a fresh set of eyes, and let me get my fresh set of eyes, because this is also, that's something that happened in COVID. So Aman, here is my question to you, right? We've all looked at COVID with, we said we've learned new habits. Your industries particularly face some challenges, right? Sure. And I'm sure every industry faces its own challenges, So the way that I would want to think about, during that period as well, the 2-year period that we have had, how did you make things possible, right? And in the possibilities, when you look at, there is, especially as a CEO, what is interesting to understand is, did you have to rewire the model itself, rewire the processes itself, and what did you do on the culture side to just keep not only the ship afloat, but growing?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and good morning, everyone. It's really good to be back, in these in-person events. So looking forward to this discussion and sharing this panel with some amazing folks. So to your question, I think you're right. The pandemic was an unprecedented event. No one saw it coming. I think more importantly, what we need to understand is that there was no playbook to deal with this. Most of us have seen growth. We've seen moments of, lull or kind of other economic situations, but the pandemic was one of its kind. And so not just the travel industry, and obviously as a travel industry player, we saw this from very close quarters. In fact, 90% of the planes were grounded. There were lockdowns across all cities in the world. People who were always willing to connect were not able to do so. And so that meant we had to kind of relook at things. And I think the key for us at that point of time was to go back to the basic principles again, go back to the basics. And I think from our perspective, it was like, let's try and understand what's core to us, what makes us unique. And that was one of the key driving factors for us to start focusing on understanding the core business from our perspective, which is our core hosts. We have 4 million hosts across the world in more than 10,000 cities. And we've kind of welcomed as the Airbnb as a platform over 1 billion guests across so many years. And so for us, it was very important to kind of look at all key stakeholders. Obviously, employee safety was one of the topmost areas, but then look at other key stakeholders, which was the community, the guest community, the host community, and kind of look at what is important to them and rewire ourselves in the way we think, in the way we respond to the changing consumer preferences, the changing needs at that point of the time, and then kind of create an engine that kind of responds to that, in a much more effective manner. So I'll give you an example. At the time when no one could travel, we did thousands of listening sessions with our hosts. The idea was to understand how they're feeling. Obviously, their source of income was curtailed. They were very worried about their own well-being. And obviously, there was a lot of uncertainty around. And through these listening sessions, one thing was very clear, that the innate human nature for people to connect was always there. And this is where technology came in, right? And we kind of reworked, understood the needs of our hosts, which said that we still want to connect and we still want to earn money. And that's where we created a product called Online Experiences, which was basically an extension of our physical product, the in-life real experiences, where people could just spend time online and still get access to the unique passion points and get to connect with people across the world. And within few weeks, our teams were able to rally and create this product from scratch, which resulted in not only just revenue for our hosts, but also creating an opportunity for people to reconnect, because that is the core value. And I think that is very important for us to kind of understand, how does an organization respond to change? How do we respond to any change in consumer preferences or even the way we kind of do internal processes? And for me, that was one of the biggest learnings during that process, to kind of go back to the basics, go back to the core, understand what makes you unique, and then rally your team to kind of build on that.
Wonderful, succinct summary of what you think must be done, but it's very difficult, especially the part that you talked about, figuring out what is really distinctive about you and architecting everything around it. So let me draw you, Noel. You are in an industry which is really changing, right? The operating models have gotten disrupted. Especially in the last 2.5 years, many new competitors have come in. As a CEO, how do you build this agility? And he talked about, building this change, architecting the organization to be agile. How have you done that? Especially when things are happening at a rapid pace in the context.
Sure. So thanks for the question. The last 2.5 years definitely have brought up new challenges for us. You mentioned there are a lot of new players coming in. And frankly speaking, if you ask me, this place is actually exploding, right? There is space for us, there is space for others, and there is space for a lot more. We are in a space of health and wellness, and the last 2.5 years actually showed us that people are now becoming more aware about health and wellness. The way they look at health and wellness is changing. For us, it has been more about using technology to expand our line of services. So what we were doing pre-COVID, we continued doing it during COVID at a smaller scale, maybe because of the need and the demand. During COVID, we pivoted into offering vaccinations, offering COVID-related services, RT-PCR testing, so on and so forth. And what actually kept us probably ahead of the game was the tagline that we use at Econ-Care. One is health benefits simplified. And the second thing is all things people. Now, all things people was not just about our own employees, where we said, all these benefits are there, we're not going to ask any questions, so on and so forth. But to give you one example, at the height of COVID, people were struggling to get doctor consultations.
That's right.
And the first thing we did was, yes, revenue is important, business is important. We are a B2B company, but let's just open up doctor consultations for everyone. Now, it didn't matter whether it was a corporate who was using it or somebody who was working in that organization was free to give details about our call center, our doctor services to anybody among family and friends. And that is something which allowed us to grow significantly. Pre-pandemic, we were at about 180 organizations on our as a client list. During the 2.5 years, we scaled beyond 500 companies. And I think the all thing people focus that we had and the willingness to pivot at really short notice to figure out our way, operationally, people-wise, everything worked really in our favor. Our employees moved across the country like most of the other organizations, but they stayed connected. We were able to still pull through our operations, do everything else. The other thing in terms of being agile, was to build a product that was addressing the actual need of the market. And we realized when we say this, we realized that the healthcare system was so fragmented that when an employee or an HR was looking for benefits, they were looking for everything in one place. And they were looking to make sense out of everything, where they were able to understand what was happening, when it happened, how it happened, and what are the outcomes coming out of it. So to answer your question, this focus of ours in terms of saying, define the scope, look at it from an outcomes and a people perspective is what helped us grow.
And additionally, if I were to add, and linking it back to what he said, figure out your core, also figure out your adjacencies, like, you looked at vaccination in other areas, and listen to the needs and insights, and maybe there the magic will happen. You talked about technology. And let's talk about technology. We are in a tech forum. People will be wondering, I will be structure kahas or capability and all of this. What are we talking about if we don't touch technology? Especially technology in the context of how work has changed. Right? Yeah. We've learned new habits, not only in business, but while working as well. Hybrid is here to stay in a big way. You are using technology. You talked about how you leverage technology to even reach out to a wider set of network partners in the ecosystem and even for employees. But from a hybrid perspective, and this is a personal experience, as a regulated entity, we've gone hybrid completely. We've had to look at fresh set of learnings. As we've learned new habits, some of the old habits are also hard to let go. So the two questions I have is, for you, is technology been an enabler to drive innovation, and hence hybrid has been, in a sense, multiplier to drive that innovation, or hybrid is a way to just working? It's not about innovation or other, it's just a way of working that's changed, and technology is just something that you leverage to kind of drive innovation. So
I think great topic and great questions. I would say technology is an enabler, right? And I think we need to kind of understand this. We've always said this as Airbnb, that the magic was, is, and will be in the people. And I think what we need to kind of understand is what can we do using technology to kind of make sure that we continue to foster connection and belonging through that. And I think that is what, as a company, the mission stands for. And to your point, what we saw was two things, and maybe I'll zoom out a little bit. The workforce that entered the pandemic and the workforce that's coming out of the pandemic now is very different. And I think we need to kind of, as companies, as leaders, as organizations, take into effect the changes that are now happening. Flexibility is the new buzzword, right? And flexibility is the future, I would say. We can talk about workplaces to be hybrid, workforces to be hybrid, but I think one thing that is very clear to us is that people do not want to be, if they can, tethered to one location, right? And what's happened, the way we call hybrid, but the reality is the lines between travel, the lines between living, and lines between working are now all blurred. And I think we need to kind of understand that people now want to integrate travel into their living. And when I say flexibility, as a travel company, I can tell you a few examples. What we see now is that earlier people would only travel, say, during a certain weekend or a certain holiday or a period where there is a kind of a block of 4 or 5 holidays. Now people are integrating travel into the way they live and kind of work. Many people during the pandemic, and I think that is one of the key factors that Airbnb as a company kind of bounced back from the impact of the pandemic, was that billions of people across the world started to stay in Airbnbs around the world because they had that newfound flexibility to work from anywhere. And yes, technologies like Zoom enabled people to work from anywhere, but Airbnb enabled them to work from any home. So work from home became work from any home, and people could now choose to stay in a beach destination, work first few 6 hours in a day, and then kind of spend more time with the family in that setting. So very clearly, flexibility is the new thing. And as organizations, we need to kind of understand, value, acknowledge, and build processes that kind of embrace this change. As Airbnb, we were very clear when we announced our live anywhere, work anywhere policy, which basically gave the flexibility to people to either work from an office or work from anywhere. In fact, September onwards, a large part of our workflows would have the flexibility to kind of work from any country for a certain number of days if they wish to do so. And I think what we have found is that now everything is tethered around the individual. And what we understand now is that the individual brings their unique self, an authentic self, and they are far more productive when they are in a much more comfortable environment to do so. And I think by providing them this flexibility, we've kind of figured out that the hybrid workplace becomes more effective when it comes to people being able to do things on their own pace, as well as, with their own interests in mind. The other thing that we've seen is that topics like, diversity, equity, inclusion are now table stakes for any organization. Earlier, this was something that people would aspire to kind of build into their initiatives, but we have seen the rise of a very conscious individual through the pandemic. People are making far more conscious choices in terms of not only the choices around their travel, consumption, but also where they want to work. And I think purpose-driven companies is something that many people now aspire to work for. So I think you have to kind of blend all of these in. And for me, technology is one of the key enablers to kind of make sure that all of these things stitch together.
So wonderfully put. So you're saying there's a lot of personalization and not templated stuff, whether you're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, but really architecting the organization structure around the individual. But let me draw you in, the concept of belonging, social capital and all of that. I'm sure this topic is going to be teased around in multiple panels. But from your perspective, if you were to be given a free hand, what do you define as a future-ready organization? Right? What structure, what elements, and how do we harness and bring the people aspect back again? Because work from anywhere, work from any home, working remote can be very isolating. And the tribes that we had, people would come to an organization to have a sense of belonging. Oh, I belong to this tribe, right? And those tribes are, I think, diminishing, and there are multiple tribes emerging in their own private spaces. So what do you think is a blueprint of a future-ready organization?
So I think I'll go back to that statement which I made, right? All things people at the end of the day. And you rightly mentioned that people are looking for flexibility, and I think it's across all industries. The second thing is that I was actually going through a survey that was done in 2021. It was done across 13 different companies. They spoke to around 15,000 odd people. And I think employees now are re-looking at the way they would have prioritized things before, right? It's no longer about the money. It's about a different kind of a balance. It's not as simple as even saying work-life balance. It's a very different kind of balance that people are looking for and willing to compromise on other stuff. Now, if you were to ask me as a co-founder, and I'll probably have to wear different hats at this, right? One is I have to take care of the fact that the business is running. I have to make sure that my business grows so my clients are happy as well, and they're getting the kind of services and benefits that they're looking at to get from a company like Care. But most importantly, I have to figure out that the people who actually make it happen, the employees are happy in that sense. The future of work, the way I look at it is, like I said, it's going to revolve around the employee. And as an organization, the first and foremost thing that I need to do is restructure the way I look at my goals and my objectives. I need to restructure the way my mission statement is defined. I need to relook at, everybody says technology. Yes, technology is here to stay. That's probably the only change that's going to be constant, that technology will keep coming in and newer stuff will happen. But if you're going to implement technology, you first need to decide and define for yourself what is that outcome you're expecting. Put milestones to that outcome and make sure that you're on track to achieve it, or be willing to make those quick adaptations to say, how do I now be nimble-footed to move from one to the other? Net at the end of the day, it's always going to be about the employee getting what the employee needs, being able to work from wherever, yet connect. So we use Slack, for example, in our workplace. It works fantastically well for us. We use HRMS solutions. As a tech company, there's tons of tech that we're using. But again, at the center of it all, I go back to those 4 pillars of health and wellness, the physical, the mental, the social, and the financial. I think if you start building it on these pillars, you start bringing the right technology, you put in the right measurables, you look at the right outcomes, define it from a mission level right from the top to bottom, not at a mid-level and say, let's try and do these things and figure it out. That won't work. So that's how I would define the future of things forward.
Wonderful.
I think one thing that I would like to add here is the importance of understanding the competencies and skilling comes into forefront now, right? You rightly said, as the world moved towards a small 15-inch screen, and that was our only avenue to connect with all our colleagues and friends across the world, skills around emotional connect, around self-awareness, around, you talked about the mental pillar. I think those things are now coming to the forefront in terms of all employees, and that kind of leads to the responsibility of the organization to ensure that their employees are now well equipped with some of these cognitive and softer skills, right? And so I think the L&D programs in companies are now getting tweaked primarily to start creating a more, an environment so that people are more self-aware in terms of what skills they do possess, what they lack, and how can companies kind of come in to kind of fill in that gap. And I think emotional quotient, intelligence, as well as the social connect is now becoming very, very important in today's time.
So talking about skills, it's a perfect segue for my next question. Since you also talked about getting the person in, let me draw the person in AMANPREET into the conversation. And I love your epithet, the most promising part. You've had multiple careers, right? Yes. You've been an entrepreneur, you've come back into professional life, and we all said that people will have multiple careers, but still the epithet is something that, egging you to move, realize your potential, promising. What is so distinctive about you, and what have you learned and unlearned in your journey?
Honestly, through the journey, I've never had the time to think through this in this way. But I think the idea is to follow your heart, right? At the end of the day, what I've understood is that you should not look at the destination per se. You should look life more like from a compass perspective. Set the direction and then kind of see what comes in that path. For me, very early on, I started my career as a consultant. So literally spent 200 nights sleeping in a hotel room in remote parts of the world for like in a year. And I think many of us kind of have gone through that journey. I make sure that at that point of time, I use that as an opportunity to learn more about different cultures. The fact that I was getting exposed to multicultural teams, working in, for a few weeks in a small town in Taiwan and then a small town in Rajasthan, the idea was to kind of understand what drives people. And I think for me, compassionate leadership is the most important aspect from a growth perspective. People are the biggest asset for any company. And I do believe that that needs to be nurtured. And empathy and other skills are very important to kind of connect at all levels. And so for me, everything that I've done, whether it was the consulting stint and then obviously donning the entrepreneurial turban in my case, it was very important to kind of make sure that whatever we do has to have people in the center. And I think I was lucky enough to then work for a corporate like Airbnb, which kind of brings this to the center again. Communities. And I think at the heart of what we do at Airbnb, or what we've done in the past, is basically how do we empower communities, whether it's in the travel space. In the past it was more on the retail side, but the idea has always been into how do we empower communities that have been underserved in the past, that have not got the benefits of, say, some of the technological revolutions. How do you use technology to create that impact in any of these domains? And I think for me, technology as an enabler has been the key driving theme in terms of what change it can bring to people.
Wonderful. And he's simply sidestepped the question of unlearning. So let me ask the question to you. Noel, what is the one thing that you've had to unlearn or relearn or really learn as an entrepreneur? I'm sure the journey hasn't been easy.
So lots of things, actually. I spent 5.5 years to become a doctor. At the end of it, I did a hospital management course, and my family was like, is this guy going bonkers? I mean, and that was still early in the day, okay? Because after spending so much of time and effort to become a doctor, now it was like getting into hospital management. So the first thing was now unlearning the whole clinical side of things and trying to become somebody who's going to manage and run a hospital. And then I get into insurance, and my dad says like, oh, I was right. This guy has lost it. I spent 8 years in the health insurance space. And from there on, the whole journey started, right? I mean, forgetting about a lot of the clinical stuff. And as a doctor, you want to diagnose. In insurance, you're trying to figure out risk, which is very different from an individual falling sick to understanding what's it going to be for a population. And from there, I got into a reinsurance company, helping them set up their reinsurance business here in India, which was then again a lot about data. Right? Now it was not about looking at data and saying, okay, this is a risk from a claim that has come in, but now projecting risk for large populations in terms of saying, what is the morbidity rate, what's the mortality rate, who are the people we can take on board. And after about 16 years of, I would say, a good life, pretty relaxed when you work for these large organizations, I decided to drop everything and then get into Econ Care, and starting off with being an entrepreneur at Econ Care, with all the uncertainties, with all the risks that were involved. But I think while I was unlearning all of these things, there was a lot of insights that came in, right? And it still connects me to the first thing that I started off with, wanting to be a doctor. It's about helping individuals get better at their health. It's still there today with the health insurance. It was still there with the reinsurer. It's still there today because I'm now using the technology that I've got exposed to with my co-founders. I'm using all the numbers that I got exposed to with all my actuarial colleagues at the reinsurance firm. All of this coming together. So I think life is always going to be about learning, unlearning, relearning, and just putting it all together.
Wonderful. So at this juncture, I think we can have 1 or 2 questions, because they've left a nice gap and some curiosity and interest in terms of unlearning, learning. Any questions? Okay, gentlemen here. If you can introduce yourself and just ask the question.
Hi, myself Shrikant here. This question is for Dr. Noel sir. Uh, because of the last 2 years, what we have seen, what everyone has seen because of the pandemic, there are 3 necessities that were there: roti, kapada, makan. Now there is a 4th necessity called Medicare. So a person shifting from one city to another city, apart from these 3 aspects, he is now looking like which is the nearest hospital or which is the nearest doctor that I can consult to. And that has been the kind of thought process that has been there. So my question is, see, while we talk about medical, so the outreach would have grown from 5% to 50%, right? But how do we ensure that this 50% is covered to 100%, considering 2 aspects? One aspect is the demographic of our country, right? And the family household income. So how do we ensure that this 50% is taken to 100%?
2 parts. One is the whole accessibility, and the second part is the affordability part of it, right? Frankly speaking, both of these have actually got answered using technology, right? Today, for example, you can connect with a doctor in less than 30 seconds. So you get the profile of the doctor, you know the doctor's credentials, and you connect with the doctor. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is the affordability part. Definitely, yes, if people have to now, and I'll answer that question in a slightly different way, right? The first and foremost thing that anybody does today is, if you have a fever, you rush off to a tertiary care hospital. You land up in the emergency room and you pay a lot more for treatment. Whereas actually, you could actually consult a general physician who's very well equipped to take care of that fever, that cold, that stomach ache, so on and so forth, which again is being done by technology. You get access first to a general physician that's there on our platform, and that's why I'm saying it. You get access to a general physician, and then if required, you get in touch with a specialist. And because of telemedicine now, it doesn't matter which part of the country you're in, whether you're in an urban, semi-urban, rural area, so on and so forth. Having said that, yes, the problem that you have mentioned still exists, that there are times when you have to see a doctor physically. You have to go and meet the doctor physically. And the way our country is, this problem is going to be there. It has to be dealt with very differently. And I don't think there is a single bullet or a silver bullet that's going to answer this. There are organizations who are focusing on rural India. There are organizations that are focusing on urban India, and the way they deliver these things are different. So there's not a single bullet, but there is an answer that covers everything. It is being done today.
Okay, we are, I think, out of time. Can we take one more question? Yeah. Please introduce yourself and keep the question short.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Rahul. I'm from Disney Star. I just wanted to ask how difficult is taking bold decisions for CXOs here, right? Like you spoke about opening Econ Care for everybody, right? How difficult is taking such bold decisions and making it profitable for your organization?
Aman, if you can answer.
I'll go back to the same thing that I talked about. Go back to the basics. What's core to you? What's important to you as a company? And I think when you're taking those decisions, you have to take into account all key stakeholders, right? In our case, as a travel company, some of our key stakeholders was obviously our employees, the host community, the guest community, and also the larger society, the communities that get benefit from a platform like ours. And so as a CEO, I think, or as any leader in the organization, I would say this responsibility does not only lie at an entrepreneur or a CXO level. It percolates down, and I think all organizations should strive for a structure where managers are kind of equipped to take these decisions that are ultimately in the interest of all these stakeholders. And I think overall what I believe is that what we can focus on as managers, as leaders, as organizations is basically the inputs. And I think, I've been reading a book which is called The Score Takes Care of Itself. I think it's an amazing book, an analogy with like sports training. But in the end, if you're only focused on your inputs, in the end, business metrics, financial metrics, and everything will take care of itself. I think we need to be core, we need to be true to what we as a company stand for and the mission that we stand for.
On that note, we have to end. But let me ask just the last, this is a season of hampers, coffee hampers and rapid fire. I couldn't complete, so let me just ask the last question. Work from home or work from any home, Airbnb home? Your wife's watching.
Work from any home across the world. I've stayed in almost like 15 homes in the last few months, and I've enjoyed every bit of it, meeting new people. And yes, my wife was with me, accompanying me, so she was also very happy. So I think that's the best balance I could have kind of looked for.
And for you, asynchronous communication or synchronous communication?
Synchronous.
Asynchronous. Okay. Okay. So there you go. Wonderful insights from both the gentlemen here. Thank you so much, and I hope you catch up with them. And if there are questions, please do reach out to them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.